Right, it's all gone quiet. Let's kick off. So first of all, thank you so much to everyone for coming today. When we planned this event, we didn't know if it was going to be in real life or virtual or how many people we'd be allowed. So you are a small but select and hugely important audience today. Just to make you aware before we kick off, we're not expecting any fire alarms, so if you hear one, go outside, follow the signs. And we are filming today's event and taking some photos, just to make you aware of that. Any issues, please talk to our assistant. So I'm Bridget. I'm Bridget Jones. I'm the Deputy Leader here at Birmingham City Council. And it is our first real-life event in over a year. It's especially lovely to have our young people here with us, who we're going to be hearing from a bit later. The report that we're launching today explores youth unemployment in our city in the context of COVID-19, as everything is these days. It also looks at some of the wider factors that affect the employability of young people, such as mental health, digital inclusion, and how these have been impacted by the pandemic. It's an issue that is hugely important for us here in Birmingham. We are a young city, as we keep saying. Our median age is 33. Youth issues affect a much greater proportion of our population than in other places, and they also have a much bigger impact on our economic future as a city. It's also an issue that's quite personally important to me, which is why I wanted us to tackle this as a council. I was in the cohort of people that used to be young, who I know my place, who entered the workplace, or at least tried to enter the workplace during the last recession, as that was really biting. And I remember quite personally the hopelessness that was felt by myself and a lot of my friends at the time about that situation, and how that affected us. It's a very, very different crisis that we've got today, but it is one that again is falling on young shoulders. So, why did we do this? Well, I've set some of that out, but as we entered the pandemic and the first lockdown, it became very quickly clear that young people would suffer the brunt of the economic and social fallout from all of this. What we might not have anticipated, however, was the extent of that impact on young people, their lives and their jobs. So as well as the disruption to schools, to universities, to young people were far more likely to be working in sectors that were shut down during the pandemic. Things like hospitality, leisure and non-essential retail will disproportionately employ young people. 22% of young people work in these sectors compared to 16% of the population as a whole. So at the beginning of the pandemic, in March 2020, 10.9% of young people aged 18 to 24 in our city were unemployed. That's now almost doubled to 19.6%. That's 1 in 5 of our young people in the city are currently unable to find work. So it's clear to us that something had to be done to understand the impact of this very unique crisis, and work out what as a city and as partners we could do to further support our young people. So this wasn't a slow piece of work, it wasn't a quick piece of work rather. We've been working on this for nearly a year now. We've undertaken an extensive programme of research with education providers, local employers, but most importantly, of course, young people themselves. Our focus was on taking a bottom-up approach, speaking directly to stakeholders across the city to understand the challenges that they face on the ground day to day. We've sought to understand the lived experience of young people and the impact of COVID-19 on their lives in their own words. And we've been testing our findings as we've gone along. We didn't get to the end and come up with a list. Every thought that we had, we've been triangulating and validating the information that we've had back with businesses, education providers and young people to make sure that we've got things that are properly hitting the mark. So who did we speak to? Everyone. We've spoken to an extraordinary 2,000 young people from across Birmingham. And I just want to put on record my thanks to everyone who took part in this. It's one of the biggest responses we've ever had as a city council to a consultation that we've put out. On top of that, we've spoken to 300 local businesses across the city to understand how things look from their point of view in providing things to young people, and 26 education providers as well as a range of stakeholders from frontline services and partner organisations. We've been absolutely overwhelmed by the feedback that we've had back and the response to our research, especially from the young people who were just eager to get involved and tell us about their experiences. But most importantly, they were challenging us on what we were going to do to support them. So we've got a short video to show you now, straight from young people's mouths. You may recognise some of the faces from when you walked in. We've got some of our stars here today. I will hand you over to hear from them directly before we go into what we found.
I kind of like completely lost motivation to do things. I felt like all my classmates were doing better than I was. A lot of people were coping with it better than others, but I felt like a lot of people weren't doing this all behind the scenes. I'm not gonna lie, I turned up to all my lessons, but I think most of us just stayed in bed and didn't do anything. Online learning wasn't really the same as being with your teachers and everything. We didn't get to have the proper college experience, enrichment clubs and stuff, or meeting other teachers or talk to anyone. We didn't have our mocks either. We kind of got short. It just felt really weird, and especially being around your friends as well. It's just really depressing. I left school I made a pact to do well and have a change, and then it all just went downhill.
So lockdown has been very intense for me because basically I was following the rules. So I live with a vulnerable person, so I literally basically stayed in the house the entire time. When we were out of lockdown, I still stayed at home. So I've been essentially in a lockdown for a very long time, and it's been very intense and just kind of lonely and stuff as well. For me, the challenges of lockdown were knowing you're essentially doing the right thing, but other people, especially other people your own age, aren't doing it. I was put on furlough in April for quite a few months, and then I was made redundant in September 2020. So it really affected me in terms of employment or unemployment. And I can smile now, but at the time it was very, very depressing. And people don't really talk about it that much, but I feel like long-term job hunting is really taxing on your mental health. So I really struggled a lot.
I wasn't walking around the park every day. I share a room with my twin brother. You can imagine getting out the house when you can is valuable. The majority of people through lockdown have had either traumatizing or just not nice experiences. Even though mine may be an optimistic experience, by far it's still been quite challenging.
The first challenge was getting out of my apartment. I had to find a way to go beyond the borders of my own four walls, and then also to being young, being on my own in this scale. I've been on my own for 5 years, but never on this scale before. It was really difficult to envision a hopeful future because you're running out of money. I need to shout out my group that just opened up Yard Art House, because if it wasn't for that pot of money in the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have paid my rent that month.
The things that I would be looking forward to, I would say gigs, of course. It's the creative and cultural side, but also who doesn't like food?
I really look forward to the way in which the city's blooming in terms of the support towards its creative residents, especially with what with the big move of the BBC?
I'm looking forward to the Commonwealth Games. You know, I signed up to be a volunteer for that, and I recently started a new job, which is just perfect. You know, it allows me to get involved with the city and a lot of communities in the city. I'm just really excited for the future, and yeah.
So, that was a taste of what some of our young people have been telling us throughout this research. To tell us more about the key findings that we've got from this, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Jane Francis, who is our Cabinet Member for Education, Skills and Culture at Birmingham City Council.
Thank you very much, Bridget, and a special round of applause to our young people who are in the room who took part in that film. The messages were absolutely spot on, and we really, really appreciate it. So yes, a special thanks to the young people who've joined us today, and some of them are here, and I think it really helps to demonstrate why we're all here, the very real impact that the pandemic has had on young people, and the reason why we need to take action. One of the reasons we wanted to do this research was to really understand the stories behind the numbers. It's very easy to be blinded by the statistics, but we need to remember that behind every statistic are real people and real stories. Every young person who is unable to find a job is another young person who is being prevented from fulfilling their true potential. As a city, we have a duty to seek out and understand the reality of young people's experiences, and to ensure that they and our city have a prosperous future. What I'm going to do now is give you a whistle-stop tour of the main findings of the research, based on our engagement, as Bridget said, with over last year, over 2,000 young people, 300 businesses, and some 25 education providers in the city. We'll go on to the first finding. An important finding is that, on the whole, COVID-19 has not created new barriers to employment for young people. Instead, it has exposed and exacerbated the inequalities and the barriers that already existed before the pandemic. Now, we'll all be aware that Birmingham is a city of contrasts. Prior to the pandemic, there were long-standing differences in employment outcomes between different groups of young people. Household income, household situations, and mental health are just a few of the wider social factors that affect the employability of a young person. Where some groups of young people already faced additional barriers to employment before COVID, these have often been made worse by the pandemic. And undoubtedly, without urgent action, there is a real danger that the pandemic will widen these existing equality gaps substantially. Next slide. Linked to our first finding is the fact that not all the young people we spoke to in our research project are struggling. In fact, there is a significant cohort of young people whose employment and career prospects do not seem to have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. This may seem like a strange thing to draw out from the research, though I think it's important to understand that not all young people are the same. They all face different challenges when it comes to employment and work experience, and they've all had different experiences of the pandemic. Our third finding is that the pandemic has had significant negative impact on the mental health of young people in Birmingham, affecting their motivations and their ability to find work experience or look for work. Over 3/4 of the young people that we spoke to, 76.6% said that their mental health had deteriorated over the course of the past 18 months, experiencing high levels of anxiety and fear about their future, worrying that things would never go back to normal, and that their dreams and aspirations would be lost to them forever. Others described a real sense of loss, almost like a grief, that they had missed out on the most important year of their lives, and many of the rites of passage that many of us take for granted. Like many of us, many young people felt isolated and lonely. This feedback was mirrored by education providers who spoke to us about the work that they've been doing to support young people to develop their confidence and to develop their resilience. Employers also talked told us about the importance of confidence, worrying that many young people were shutting themselves off from opportunities due to a lack of aspiration or self-belief. Our fourth finding was that many young people in Birmingham still don't have access to the right technology to enable them to succeed in a post-COVID world, whether that's not having reliable access to the internet, not having an internet-enabled device, or simply not having enough space or a suitable environment to do work in. Digital exclusion was one of the biggest barriers to work experience and employment during the pandemic. We found big differences in levels of digital exclusion between different groups. Young people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities were far less likely to have access to the equipment or to the space they needed to work remotely, 59% compared to 67%. Care leavers and care experienced young people are also far less likely to have equipment or space compared to their peers. We found that work experience is a major source of anxiety for many young people who are struggling to find the right opportunities to build their CV or to get professional experience and demonstrate their abilities to employers. This is another problem that was building prior to the pandemic, and with the rise in zero-hour contracts and the decline in traditional part-time or weekend jobs, many young people were already dependent on work experience to get their foot on the first rung of the employment ladder. However, with businesses under increasing financial strain due to the pandemic, COVID seems to have led to a dramatic decline in the number of work experience opportunities for young people. So over the course of our research, we also found major concerns that our current model of careers advice and guidance is not providing young people with the skills, knowledge and transferable skills they need to succeed in the modern world of work. This came through strongly from education providers in particular, employers and many young people themselves. Whilst we did find many examples of best practice in practical services in Birmingham, it's clear that we have many amazing committed people working in this area. We also heard from many people who felt that not all young people are getting the support they need to succeed. Many businesses told us that soft skills such as communication, problem solving and the ability to work as part of a team are just as important as technical skills and qualifications. Yet many services continue to provide job advice rather than careers advice, focusing on getting young people into employment as the end goal rather than setting them up to navigate a changing career over their lifetime. And in the rush to catch up on learning after the pandemic, there is a risk that we will take the focus away from careers advice just when young people need it most, which we cannot allow to happen. So one of the biggest discoveries that we made was that of a major communications gap between young people looking for employment and the businesses that want to employ them. The majority of the employers we spoke to were enthusiastic and optimistic about hiring young people, seeing it very much as a key priority to safeguard the future of their businesses. A third of the businesses we spoke to had specifically tried to recruit young people aged 16 to 24 in the past 6 months. But despite this, it often seems that businesses and young people are speaking different languages, with businesses and whole sectors struggling to successfully engage with young people and make them aware of the opportunities on their doorstep here in Birmingham. Many businesses told us that they didn't know what channels to use to communicate with young people, and that even when they found applicants for the roles, they struggled to accurately assess their skills and abilities. Equally worrying, we also uncovered another gap between business and young people, the optimism gap, with many young people having an unrealistically negative view of the job market, feeling very much like they're a low priority for employers and convinced that there are no opportunities out there for them. Tackling this communications divide and this optimism divide is key to tackling youth unemployment in Birmingham. Another key finding is that businesses, especially small, micro and medium-sized enterprises, continue to face a range of barriers to employing young people in Birmingham. Some of these barriers, such as the impact of social distancing restrictions and reduced cash flow due to lockdown, are directly linked to COVID-19 and are expected to gradually ease as part of the wider economic recovery. Other barriers, however, are much longer term and existed prior to the pandemic, although they've been exacerbated by COVID. One of the most important barriers that businesses told us about is the bureaucratic burden of recruiting younger staff, who often require additional training and support to succeed, and more direct supervision. This burden is further increased with targeted youth employment schemes such as Kickstart, apprenticeships or traineeships, which businesses see as involving excessive amounts of red tape, bureaucracy and management time. For smaller businesses especially, the time, resource and financial investment required to participate in youth employment schemes continues to be a major barrier to involvement. So over the course of our conversations with businesses, we constantly heard from employers that the current employment and skills landscape is overly complicated and difficult to navigate. A lack of awareness of youth employment schemes and the organisations that provide youth employment support was one of the top 3 barriers that prevented businesses from recruiting more young people. Many businesses, especially SMEs and micro-enterprises, were simply overwhelmed by the number of different schemes and sources of information available to them, and felt that they simply didn't have the capacity, time or resources to research and understand all the available options. We went on to find very low levels of awareness and understanding of key youth employment initiatives, including digital boot camps, National Careers Service and sector-based work academy programmes. We also found low levels of awareness of many of the organisations that currently support young people, with many businesses not understanding the work that they did or the role that they play in the city. Businesses overwhelmingly felt that more could be done to improve communications and to raise awareness of schemes and organisations and better support them to support young people. Finally, we found that employers had very mixed opinions of the effectiveness of youth employment schemes. Whilst more established options such as graduate schemes and apprenticeship programmes were more likely to be rated as effective, other newer schemes received mixed feedback. Kickstart, the national flagship COVID recovery youth employment scheme, saw opinions divided right down the middle, with 24% of businesses saying that the scheme was effective and 27% of businesses rating it as ineffective. When prompted, employers identified a range of issues with the design of Kickstart that were affecting its ability to deliver the right candidates to businesses. They felt that the scheme was too bureaucratic, with a complex sign-up process for both employers and young people, and took too much control away from businesses who had little control over which candidates they received. Overwhelmingly, the businesses that we spoke to very much wanted to be involved in the design of youth employment schemes from the very beginning. As a vital part of their local economies, possessing valuable insight into their communities, it is clear that any solution to youth unemployment must involve local businesses, as well as education providers, public sector partners, and of course our young people themselves. So those were the key findings of our research. The question is now what we're going to do to deliver the change that is required. And I will now hand over to my colleague Bridget, who is going to talk through the report recommendations. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's what we found. What are we going to do about it? So the overarching message, as Jane has said, is loads of these barriers, pretty much all of these barriers were here before COVID, but COVID has exacerbated them for young people and widened that gap. We've got a bigger gap for young people to catch up on than we did before. And it's our role as a council, but also across the partnership, and I know loads of our guests today are from our partners, to connect that demand from employment, for employment from our young people with some of the incredible opportunities that exist in our city and are coming down the pipeline, there's cause for optimism here. I know this sounds very gloomy, everything that we've presented so far, but with Birmingham, we've got the Commonwealth Games coming, we've got High Speed 2 coming, we've got opportunities that nowhere else in the UK has right now, right on the horizon. The task for us is to join those opportunities up to our young people who we've heard are missing out and overcome those barriers. So, how are we going to do it? So recommendation 1. First one we've come up with is reducing the cost of public transport for 16 to 18-year-olds. Now, there's a lot of schemes out there offering discounts to young people in this cohort, but the overwhelming feedback that we got from young people is that they're really patchy. They don't cover young people in all circumstances. If you are going to things like unpaid work experience or an internship, you can't necessarily get access to discounts. And for younger people in less stable households, more chaotic lifestyles, it's really hard to access some of those schemes. It requires a lot of paperwork, it requires a lot of proof. If your circumstances change, you might lose access. So the first recommendation is to break down that barrier by working with partners to explore how the cost of travel could be further reduced for the cohort of 16 to 18-year-olds. And simplify the existing concessionary fares landscape and make it possible for young people to navigate that. Moving on to the next recommendation, and these next 3 are quite tightly linked together, and you'll see why. It's support for young people's mental health. We knew it was in crisis before the pandemic hit. Good God, the pandemic has given it a battering. It could not be in a poorer place as it is now. But it's not just young people telling us that this is an issue, it's employers as well saying it's holding young people back from being able to perform in the workplace and being able to take up the opportunities that are out there. 65% of respondents to one of our surveys said they were actively struggling with their mental health, 25% on a daily basis. It was already bad before, now it's tanking. And young people in crisis have told us that they need much swifter access to more intensive forms of support. So our second recommendation to improve access to jobs is to help improve mental health across the city. Greater access to general mental health support within schools and education providers and workplaces needs to be made available to support young people, and early access to support when anxiety or low mood first starts to stop it from cascading down into deeper problems is what we need. Linked to that is recommendation 3 for us, which is to support young people to build confidence and resilience. So our research again and again identified a lack of confidence as a major barrier to employment for young people, and it's totally understandable when the news is telling you that the world is falling down. Of course you are going to lack confidence in stepping out and taking your place in it. But we were hearing it from employers as well. Employers were saying that they needed help to help young people to build up that emotional and psychological resilience to navigate everyday crises of modern life and employment, and to act as a safeguard for good mental health. So that development of resilience, that ability to bounce back when things go wrong, is something that we learn as we grow up. It's something that lots of key life events teach you as a young person. But of course, as we've just heard, young people have just had that crucial part of their lives disrupted. They've missed out on those key events, they've missed out on some of those milestones, and they've lacked some of those chances to sort of learn as they go. So the recommendation here is that we undertake further work to explore how resilience and confidence building activities can be built across the wider school curriculum at all ages, but with a particular focus on preparing young people for adult life. And examples of best practice, including work already carried out by specialist youth services, it needs to be highlighted and options considered for the expansion of the offer to ensure more equal access across the city, because we know it's really patchy. So the third recommendation in this basket, again linked to this, is developing a comprehensive city-wide mentoring scheme. Now there's schemes out there, but again, it is not hitting all young people, and it is not hitting the young people that need it most in the ways that they need it most. Mentoring can take many forms, but fundamentally the purpose that we're looking for here is to inspire young people and to broaden their horizons. So over the course of our research, something that was coming out from schools, from young people, from employers, was that a lot of young people are under-aspiring and failing to make the most of the opportunities that are out there for them in our city. And it's either because they've got a poor understanding of their own incredible skills and talents and what they can bring to the table, and they don't realise the potential that they've got, or because they just lack that up-to-date information about what's out there and what their options are. So when young people, particularly who are care leavers, who are women and from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, were telling us that they also saw a lack of representation in many of our workforces around the city, putting them off from pursuing careers in certain sectors. So our recommendation on this one is twofold. It's to it's recommended that work is undertaken to develop an easily accessible citywide mentoring scheme to connect young people with mentors from across the world of business. Crucially, that's got to include entrepreneurs and the self-employed. And the second part of it is the consideration should be given to the idea of peer mentors, people who've been through the same things as young people. They've got the same backgrounds, they've been through the same challenges, and they can relate on how to break down some of those. We don't want to duplicate existing provision. There's some great stuff out there already, but it's not hitting all the young people who need it. Moving on to recommendation 5. So this one was around facilitating accessible work experience opportunities. Again and again, we heard from young people they haven't been able to get hold of work experience. Big problem before the pandemic, pretty much impossible when you literally weren't allowed to leave your houses for most of a year. So it's one of the biggest causes of anxiety we were hearing from young people as well, about not knowing what the future workplace would be and just that gap on their CV. Again, it's polarised. Kids in the know were getting those experiences through family or through connections that they had, and kids who weren't were completely missing out. But crucially, it's also one that we heard from employers as well. Loads of our employers were desperate to offer work experience, but they didn't have the resources in-house to do so. They didn't know where to advertise it, and they didn't know how to reach the kind of young people that they wanted to reach. It's worth noting that 96% of our businesses in the city are micro businesses or SMEs. They don't have big back offices. They don't have big HR departments to organise work experience. They don't have the resources to be able to put together these packages. They need it made easy for them to put on work experience, and they need it made easy for them to find places to advertise that and to get young people in. So our recommendation on this one is to create a citywide system for the facilitation of work experience placements, and to ensure that all young people have got an equal opportunity to gain experience and skills, but also crucially to support businesses to provide those opportunities to young people, because that is a massive gap that we have identified. Moving on to recommendation 6. So, as James told us, access to digital, access to devices, access to data is a huge problem for our young people that was just completely masked by the pandemic. A lot of the time universities and colleges were picking up the slack with their facilities and hadn't realised just how excluded a lot of our young people were from all of this. And it's particularly an acute concern for care leavers and from people from poorer households. So our recommendation here is to develop and implement a citywide digital inclusion strategy. 8.6% of our population are currently classed as digitally excluded, and we've got this persistent digital divide that we need to broach. And it's even more important now than ever because so many courses are moving permanently online, so many workplaces are expecting young people to work at home more and more. But it's not just about having devices, it's also about having somewhere to work. So the recommendation on this is twofold. Again, the first is to develop a citywide digital inclusion strategy linked to regional aspirations. I know the CA is already doing some work on that, but really doing something comprehensively aimed at our young people, but also giving some consideration to the provision of secure, comfortable and accessible spaces for young people to go and work and to do their homework and to do their coursework and to access opportunities like libraries or wherever that might be. We've got to make sure that what we provide meets what young people need today. Number 7, nearly there folks. Number 7 is to give young people a voice. So it's really interesting when we did the research. We had tick boxes and in our young people survey, and we had a free text box at the bottom, and people that helped us do the research were astonished at just how much information was coming back in that free text box. They'd never seen anything like it in a survey that they had done. Young people writing essays telling us about their experiences, and so many of them said in it, "Thank you for asking, nobody's asked us," which was quite heartbreaking. So one of the recommendations that's come out of this is putting in the calendar of Birmingham an opportunity for everyone to hear from young people annually. We can't make this a one-off. We've got to keep going back to young people and seeing how things have changed. We've got to keep listening. We've got to keep responding to it. So the working title is the Brum Talks Festival. Young people will probably tell us that's rubbish and we should get a better title.
I like it.
But we think it's all right. But the key thing here is young people to keep on telling us they think they're a low priority group in the city. We've got to give them that voice. We've got to curate that with young people. We've got to make sure that's something that works for them. We've got to make sure it's something that makes them feel heard. Number 8 is to reshape careers, advice and guidance services. Now there are some brilliant people in the system doing some brilliant work with young people, but it is nowhere near comprehensive, it is nowhere near universal, and there's massive gaps in it. And again, this came back from young people, it came back from schools and colleges, it came back from employers as well. As Jane has said, it's a lot about getting young people into jobs. It's not about equipping you for a career. We've got massive gaps around having an entrepreneurial mindset, around engagement with employers, and even just equipping young people with the knowledge of what the job market looks like. What are our growing sectors? Where are the jobs going to be in future years? Where are the things that they can aspire to? We simply don't equip them with that information to make informed choices. So the recommendation here is around reshaping careers, advice and guidance across the city, with a focus on developing the behaviours, attitudes and skills, both hard and soft skills, that are required to support long-term career success and employability, as opposed to just getting a job. And again, we need that. We need employers and businesses firmly plugged into how we design this, because they feel that young people aren't coming forward equipped with that knowledge that they need. As I said earlier, SMEs and micro businesses are 96% of our business makeup in the city. We need to bring them into the conversation as well, rather than just focusing on the big employers. Right, recommendation 9. And this actually links back to some of our earlier recommendations, because we've recommended an awful lot of things for young people that we're going to fire at them. But again, young people were telling us they felt overwhelmed. There were so many places to find information. Employers were telling us they felt overwhelmed. They didn't know where to post information and to look for young people and engage. Schools didn't know where to signpost people. So the recommendation is to create a one-stop shop online to bring this stuff together, to advertise the work experience opportunities that we were talking about earlier, to signpost young people to courses and to other employment opportunities, to provide somewhere for businesses to get the advice that they need and access that in one place. There's a billion different schemes out there. There's loads of people doing brilliant work. We've got the DWP running schemes, we've got job centres running schemes, we've got the LEP running schemes, we've got the CA running schemes. It's all over the place. And our small businesses, without a big back office to navigate all of this, don't know how to access it, can't get hold of it, and equally our young people are just lost in that sea of things. So bring it all together, one place, simple to find, and improve accessibility that way is the goal. And finally, recommendation 10. And this is a really, really urgent one for us. And recommendation 10 is to deliver a locally designed scheme of employment support for young people and businesses. So as we come through the recovery phase, we know that we need some extra form of ongoing subsidised job scheme in the city to support our young people back into work. So the sectors they work in have been so badly hit. We need to do something different. We know there's the Kickstart scheme out there, and that's done some great work, but we've heard again and again from young people and from employers that it's not quite hitting the spot for them. Employers are struggling to access some of the opportunities there. Young people aren't comprehensively covered by it by any stretch of the imagination. We need something that's designed for Birmingham, co-produced with our employers, with our businesses, with our young people, that's going to meet the needs of Birmingham and our economy here and our young people here. So I'm looking at you, DWP. We're talking to you already. We're looking at having a locally devised scheme to build on existing work, which works for us essentially with the outcomes and the goals agreed by us and education and training providers and young people and the business community across the city. Something that works for Birmingham and is going to get in there urgently and start filling those gaps, which are all too apparent. So, quite a bit to do. We've been talking at you for quite a long time, so what we'd love to do is open it up to the floor, whether it's questions to me and Jane, or whether it's just responses to it, or things you think we've missed, or reflections from this. I'm really going to turn it over to you guys to give us some feedback on all of this, or ask us questions. I'm looking at the front row with some of our young people here.
I hope you're including me in that.
But this is your report. This is made for you, really. So we'd really love to hear. Do any of you guys want to tell us what you thought about it, or ask us anything about what you think we've missed? Sorry to put you all on the spot.
Can sit by us.
You don't have to get up in front. Any reflections? Yeah, go for it.
When you mentioned the mental health services, I think it's more due to like underfunding rather than people's access to it, because I know like at my school and my college, like there's a lot of like support of like form tutors and like mentors and stuff like that, but we all know that CAMS, like is the main one. You all know it's like horrible funding, and that's kind of like what stops some people wanting to get support, because it takes like ages and there's like a long waiting list. So it's more underfunding rather than people's access to it.
That's really helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to go next? Yeah.
Building up on that point with CAMS and mental health services generally, it's almost like in general with mental health conditions, it's as if the government waits until a breaking point in which to help young people, and that is completely the wrong way to think about it. You need preventative measures in order to make sure that people don't develop or don't exacerbate certain disorders or mental health conditions in the first place.
Absolutely.
Really important. Thank you.
Yeah, make a comment.
Go for it.
You can come at the front if you like.
No, I'll stand here. First of all, I'd just like to thank Bridget, Jane, and all those who've been involved in producing what is clearly a really important piece of work with a very important set of recommendations that go with it. I think that was indicated on one of the earlier slides when we saw that we currently have 1 in 5 of our young people in this city unemployed, and that is before the full effect of furlough comes off at the end of September, when the situation undoubtedly will get worse. We also saw on that slide that 1 in 4 young people think that the pandemic has destroyed their career opportunities, and we simply cannot afford to allow those things to continue. We heard some really powerful testimony in the video. But what I was really pleased about was that the young lady who ended the video ended it on an optimistic note. She actually said that she was excited for the future, and I think that's important because I too am optimistic for the future, and I think there are some real reasons why we should all be optimistic about the future of this city and our lives within this city. The City Council has for some years now been working very hard to drive investment into the city, to create jobs and opportunities, not only for young people, but for all of the people that live in Birmingham. Our challenge is the one that Bridget mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is to connect the young people from Aston and Yardley, from Wheelie Castle right through to Allen Rock, and from every community and neighbourhood right across the city, to those job opportunities and to the benefits of all of the growth that we're creating in Birmingham. And I think a good example of that is what we're doing over at Perry Bar. What we're doing at Perry Bar is generated by the Commonwealth Games. Had we not been successful in bidding for the Commonwealth Games, we would not be doing this in Perry Bar, where we're now investing in excess of £700 million into that one part of Birmingham that's creating thousands of jobs and thousands of new homes for the growing population of Birmingham. And as part of that project, we have insisted that young people who grew up in the area be given a start in the world of work. So those young people now are helping to build a sustainable community in their own neighbourhood. We have other projects too that are coming down the stream, HS2, Smithfield, and the East Birmingham Inclusive Growth Strategy that sits over one of the most deprived parts of Birmingham. All of these things will mean thousands more quality jobs. And through this 10-point action plan that Bridget has just presented and we're launching today, we are determined that we will help young people from right across the city to have the opportunity to access those jobs, those roles, and to build thriving careers for themselves. Now, like others in this room, I was born and I grew up in this city. So I'm absolutely determined that for future generations, if you grow up in Birmingham, you will have a share in this city's success. So the council will keep working to bring in that investment. We'll continue to create the jobs, and as Bridget said, we will continue listening to young people to ensure that you do have a stake in what I still believe to be a golden decade ahead for this city and its people. All we have to do is believe in it and have the will to deliver it. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to say a few words if I may. Hello everybody, I'm Deborah Cannon, I'm Chief Exec, I'm really privileged to be Chief Exec of Birmingham City Council. And like Councillor Ward, I was born and brought up in this brilliant city. And like him, I'm absolutely passionate on delivering better opportunities for young people who grow up in this brilliant place. Now, I think it's a city of huge talent and potential, but we all know too often that some of that talent goes untapped. And I've worked with some of the young people across the region. Some of them are here today, and it's really good to see you. And some young people in the city. So I know this to be true. So today's report highlights the challenges and the barriers facing young people as they move from education into the world of work. But it also sets out a very clear action plan for what we need to do to make the change. And the focus is absolutely on action. And I'm committed to working with partners like the West Midlands Combined Authority, and it's great to see Julie Nugent here, who's the Director of Skills and Productivity, with employers in particular, and with education providers. I've already begun discussions with Department for Education and DWP, and it sounds, Des, like we've got a big job to do. We are talking about the Kickstart scheme, and we've heard very loudly the criticisms and challenges that people are experiencing with that Kickstart scheme. And we've heard very loudly that this needs to be a scheme that meets the needs particularly of Birmingham and its young people. But it's just one part of the jigsaw that will take us through to meeting the needs of young people and addressing the issues of unemployment for them. One of my first jobs when I worked in Birmingham during the 80s, and I was really, really young then, was working on a YTS scheme. And it didn't work. And it didn't work because there was lack of sustainable employment at the end. And that doesn't need to be the case now. As Councillor Ward said, we're entering this golden decade of opportunities for this brilliant city. And the challenge for us is to make sure that those opportunities are opportunities that young people feel are for them. So I'm back in the council once again, and I'm absolutely determined to help and work with all of you young people in the room. This report is a starting point. And it's also something that we acknowledge we can't address and deliver on our own. So the challenge is for us all to work together to make sure that we can turn these actions, or these words rather, into action. So I'm really looking forward to working with you to make that happen. Thank you.
Right. Liam.
Thank you very much.
We couldn't let you arrive late and then not say something.
Sorry for slightly late coming back from the Commons. So congratulations. This is a hugely significant report. It's a hugely welcome report, and it is all the better because of the extraordinary input from young people in the city. So I just want to say a word about voice, architecture and leadership. So out there in the square was the site of one of the most inspiring things I've seen in the city in the last couple of years. If anybody was here who watched the Black Lives Matter protests organised by our young people in the square, you'll have seen patterns, behaviours that we'd already seen with the youth climate strike. Generation Z growing up in the city is the most entrepreneurial, collaborative, creative, powerful generation that we've had in the city since the days of Matthew Bolton and James Watt. The way people came together, the way people taught each other, the way people expressed themselves was just mind-blowing. And the Bron voice, whatever you call it, it's, you know, do it in the square. You know, get our young people together in the square because they're stunning. And I just wish everybody in the country had the chance to see them. The second point is about architecture. The truth is, as we know, you know, we've been around this block so often, the architecture to support our young people is shattered. It's chaotic. It's a mess. And part of the consequence of that is sky-high youth unemployment in places like Hodge Hill. So if we were a European country, I think the West Midlands would be, what, the 20th biggest European country. We are a big enough state for us to put this jigsaw puzzle together. But right now, employers have no way of talking about the opportunities of the future with people who are advising young people on what on earth to do with their lives. Certainly they can't do that in infant school or junior school, which is where that conversation needs to start. I've had too many depressing conversations with leaders of major infrastructure projects who come to me and say, it'd be great if you could introduce us to some of your schools. And you kind of think, how have we ended up with a system where people running billions of pounds of public expenditure don't have a strategic relationship with our educators and our advisors for our young people? So, you know, we have got to fix that. But the final point is about leadership, because as one of the youngest cities in Europe, Birmingham has got a responsibility to be a global leader, not a national leader, a global leader. And so my appeal is that as part of this, please connect with other young cities around the world. Please connect with Gabriela Ramos, who is the ex-G20 Sherpa, who's just come in to take over the Young People's Brief at UNICEF. Invite Gabriela here. Ask Gabriela about the international examples that we should learn from and the international networks that we should feed our ideas into. Let's make it, let's set an ambition that Birmingham is actually renowned around the world as not only one of the youngest cities in the world, but one of the best places to be young in the world. These things are possible, and they're possible because of the young people we've got and the inspiration of their example. Thanks.
Colin, thank you very, very much, Liam, for that contribution. And I really take on board your point about the importance of connection between the investors that we have, the inward investment that we have, and our education providers is crucial. I stand up, apologies. The other half of my job is that I'm a real life counsellor, and at 2:30 this afternoon I've got my council surgery, so I'm going to have to leave in the very capable hands of Bridget and colleagues here. I hope the discussion will continue after I leave. There is much work to be done. This is the start for us of something really important, and I hope you all take that on board. After I finish my surgery, I'm going to be meeting up with some young people to do some filming in the ward that I live. So this is going to continue for me this afternoon. Can I thank everybody for making the time to come today, and thank you for your support and commitment. And we need you in the future. We can't do this as a council on our own. We need our partners. So please carry on talking to them. Thank you.
Right. Is there anyone else who wants to make a contribution? I think I saw. Was it your hand at the back?
Yes, I was just going to ask for some clarity, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very welcome and it's much needed. We've had numerous programs that we've worked on over the years in terms of looking at employability, the barriers faced by young people, but bringing it all together, that's fantastic. I just want to get some clarity, really. So, in terms of transport, we're looking at 16 to 18-year-olds, but during COVID, I've been approached numerous times by students in universities who struggled as a result of COVID and having to work independently from home, not having the interactions the way they normally would in university. And some of them sort of like giving up, thinking, actually, I can't do this anymore. So I just wanted to get some clarity to say that, will this scheme be accessible to young people, like young people who are at university as well, so further afield than just 16 or 18? Because I know that was only on that one side, but I just wanted to get that clarity really to ensure that we were including them as part of this as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the recommendation was aimed at 16 to 18, so it was a particular gap in the sort of discount fare landscape that was particularly messy and particularly hard for people to navigate. But if there are other cohorts that are having trouble, yeah, we need to look at them too. And universities were part of the research that we did. We were speaking to them throughout this, and university students were as well. But yeah, the recommendation was aimed there because that's really where we saw the acute problem. But ideally, love to see that for other cohorts too. Yeah.
Hi. It's sort of a question actually. It's speaking about universities, and there's something about the West Midlands in particular that's a really, really interesting dynamic with university graduates here. As of Monday, I am the last member of my cohort that graduated from the University of Birmingham. In my cohort was in the course I did. I am now the last person in the West Midlands. Of the people who did my course, I am now the last person in the West Midlands. Now, how can that be the case? How can this be the second biggest city? And by far the second biggest combined population area. I live in Wolverhampton myself. We're now at a point where I am the last one still in the West Midlands. Now if that happens, that creates a cycle. Because I qualified from a languages course, now that's a niche course to begin with, so that's one of the reasons it's particularly bad. In engineering, of course, it's not as bad. In physics, chemistry is better. But if that's happening, how can we stop that cycle? Because if we're talking about 18 to 24-year-olds, they can't see their future here, and then they leave. But if they can't see their future here, then gradually we're going to have people not applying to our universities because they can't see their future here. They want to craft homes, they want to craft families. How do we begin to address that? Because that will form later parts of this plan.
That's a really interesting one. I think that what's changed between my graduating cohort and yours is changes to housing benefit.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, I could afford to take the gamble of staying in the West Midlands, 200 miles away from my nearest relative, and stay here and look for work. Housing benefit changes means it's much, much harder for younger people to do that now. And lots are just forced back to the family home when they don't particularly want to be, and away from those employment opportunities. There's a really good question, and one that we haven't picked up here, and I'll keep in my head. Anyone else want to? Yeah, Deborah.
So, do we want to talk about how we'll kind of continue to be held not accountable, but how we'll ensure that those 10 recommendations aren't left on the shelf?
I'm going to come to that at the end.
This was all script.
Let you drive comments and questions. I'll fill you in on that. Have I led you dry? Does anybody else want to want to throw out a question or a comment? Yeah.
I think I've got like two comments. The first one would be how can students from like primary school to say A-level age have that passion for the city and see how amazing the city is? Because I personally wasn't born here, but I moved here in secondary school, and from that I could see the beauty of the city and how I could progress on your combined authority. So I think those opportunities being signposted from a younger age allows people to understand like why it's amazing for them to stay here for university and stuff like that. And second of all, like Deborah said, how will young people will young people still be consulted about this? How will you make sure that what they've said isn't being just used as a tick box exercise, and that they're actually being listened to, and that how can we improve these things going forward and making sure that people are actually living better lives in the region?
So on the last one, we're going to have young people involved in everything we do, taking this forward. So it's not going to work unless we're listening to and involving young people. It's going to fail unless we're hearing that constant feedback about what young people would need. So yeah, we're going to make sure young people are webbed into how it works going forward. But I wasn't born here either. I came here when I was 18 and just fell in love with it. My other half, he's from Birmingham, and seeing the city through his eyes. So many people who are born here, I think, don't realise just how incredible it is compared to other places. They just don't realise like all this opportunity that's on your doorstep. I moved 200 miles across the country to come here and to get those opportunities I couldn't get at home, and to do things I couldn't do back in little old Eastbourne, which no one can find on a map and everyone thinks it's near Bournemouth. But other people have come from literally the other side of the world to make their homes here in Birmingham, and that's what makes it really special. It's got so much opportunity here that I think people just don't realise that it's right on the doorstep. But it's not always apparent if you're struggling, or if you're not told it at school. Or at the council, we're doing a local local history curriculum for schools to really show young people what their heritage is and what the history of the city is, and to tell that story of Birmingham, and to just sort of grow that appreciation really and pride in the city, because we just don't tell that story enough. But all young people, you're so lucky to be young people in Birmingham. You've got opportunities other kids in the country haven't got. Yeah.
Can I say something back? Because this whole subject about people who grow up, and as I said earlier, I was born and I grew up in this city, and people who grow up in this city not having the same level of pride in Birmingham that you see elsewhere. The examples I normally cite are Manchester and Liverpool. I don't know if you saw the news last night with Liverpool losing their status as a World Heritage Site, and they had some vox pops of Liverpool people. And the attitude of Liverpool people, well, we just don't care. It doesn't matter. This is a great place. We love our city. What do we care about what other people think? And as Bridget has said, it's always been the case here in Birmingham that we're a little self-deprecating. We don't like to shout about the city. We don't like to claim we're doing great things. Where in reality, we are doing wonderful and fantastic things. Next year, we will play host to the Commonwealth Games, the third largest multi-sporting event in the world. If these events are about anything at all, they are a celebration of youth. That is what they are about. And we are going to use the Games to help build civic pride in this city, and we're going to use the Games to help tell the history of this city to more people who live here, because it really annoys me, and I'm guilty of this as anyone, that people grow up in this city without knowing the city's history. So the culture programme, which starts next March and will run right through the period of Games and out the other side, will begin to tell the city's history to all of us as the city's citizens. The opening ceremony, which I had a sneak preview of just last week, is also going to tell the city's story as well. So we have this real unique opportunity to build pride in our city and our place. And I'm really determined that coming out of the Games, and with the history project that Bridget just mentioned that we're rolling out to schools, we will in the future have people growing up in this city that first of all know their own history, know the history of their place, but secondly are really proud of what this city, past generations, and they themselves will have the opportunity to do in the future because they live and have grown up here in Birmingham.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, I'm Henrietta. I work for the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership, and I think this report is fantastic. I think there's no time to lose. So it's a great report, but actually we all need to walk away from here remembering these 10 steps and thinking, so what are we now going to do to help deliver this? So certainly I would want to say, I think some people in the room know, but that definitely from the LEP's perspective, we want to help make this happen. And then I'm just thinking from our growth hub and skills and apprenticeship hub experience, and that's just part of that really confusing jigsaw that we've talked about earlier. There is a real mismatch at the moment with a real high level of vacancies in certain sectors, and hospitality in particular, and then there's real shocking historic high youth unemployment. And I think that mismatch of communication, where employers have got opportunities, but somehow it doesn't reach the young people who need those opportunities, linked to over 50% of the young people you surveyed saying work experience in the area I'm interested in is so important. As you can hear, I wasn't born here either. My career has meandered through all sorts of jobs, including quite a long time in cleaning and waitressing, which has taught me more arguably than the degree I did at university. And I'm not sure when I look at my 17-year-old daughter, she understands that. She understands that any work experience is invaluable work experience, and that's part of what careers advice could give her. And then I think that's careers advice not just to the young people, but to those around them who influence their decision making. Because I'm not even sure what, if anything, my kid gets taught at college about what her career might look like. I know somehow Simon Cowell seems to be the biggest inspiration to her career, and as I do hear her sing in the shower, I really hope she's got a plan B there. So I just think so I think there's just careers advice is really, really important. And then finally, just a point around the local employment support. The LEP has just been awarded £1 million ESF funding for employment support, so I'm really keen that we've literally just been awarded that. Let's work together to shape that in the way that it serves this agenda.
Thank you. I hear you. I've got a master's degree, and I learned more for my job from working in a cafe than I ever did at university. Sorry, University of Birmingham.
I'm Ilgan Yusuf, I'm the Acting Assistant Director of the Council for Skills and Employability, so no pressure there. But obviously, it's a really inspirational report in terms of what I'm taking away from it, and in terms of depth of challenge and working together on it. In terms of the city board, the youth city board, because I think there's two things that's going on here. There's obviously the skills and employability, jobs and careers, but there's also that wider piece about what the city might look like further down the line, in 10, 20 years, and what kind of place it will be for the next generation of young people. Dare I say it, the youngers amongst us today. So is there that kind of vision at play as well? So I think there is, I can see it, and we see the youth city boards playing that role. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. So Youth City Board is a sort of collective of young people from around the city that meet, and they've undertaken some amazing bits of research actually on topics that are interesting to them, and loads of that has informed our recommendations today. But yeah, going forwards, we've got City Board bringing together all of our partners, starting to work on its goals for going forward and how it wants the city to look coming out of the pandemic. But as you say, the trick is then to marry that up to the Youth City Board and our young people. And it's exactly the same methodology we did here. The methodology here was we've got loads of it was to triangulate between our young people, our employers and our education providers, and understand how these problems look from all those angles, and then work out how we took it forward together. It's exactly the same methodology that we need there. Yeah, Julie.
Hi, so Julie Winter, Bind Authority. Like others, absolutely recognise everything that's in the report. It's kind of something we're really keen to work with you on. I think one of the things that frustrates me, and I'm a Brummie as well, so I'm born in ACOT Green, love sparking on an ACOT Green, there's so much opportunity, and yet actually when we look across the region, the numbers, the volume, it's bigger than it needs to be here, and that's frustrating. There are more, fewer kickstart placements than there should be, job postings that can't get filled, so the frustration, why aren't we matching it up, and we're not getting it right here? But I think the one thing I would say is that the ability of partners and the desire to do something in Birmingham, I think it comes back to your pride thing again. People really want to make it work, we really want to get behind Birmingham. We reached out recently to some of our colleges and universities around kickstart placements, and every single one of them stepped forward, yes, we want to help, what do we need to do? So I think that's what Henrietta said, there's a real desire to get behind the leadership here and say, what do you need from us, and to support you in doing it, so we're in. Whatever it takes, we're in.
Lovely. Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Des Grant. I work for Job Centre Plus, so I'm the service leader for Birmingham and Solihull, so I'm responsible for all of the job centres in Birmingham City. Really pleased to hear that. I'm keen to help in any way that I can. We've been talking, like I say, in terms of how we can do that. In terms of some of the things we've already been doing to help that, unemployment has increased, youth unemployment has doubled, and I've taken on 550 new work coaches. So a big proportion of those coming into the business are young Birmingham residents. So that's a really sort of like positive thing to sort of like put in. New estate as well being procured in terms of supporting that as well, so using some of that's available. And the work coaches that are working with our young people have a smaller caseload of young people so that they can give them more time. But one of the things, there's sort of like three things really I just wanted to talk about, and ultimately there are 1,400 people working through my job centre. So really there's a bit of this conversation that we'll be sort of like going through is, how can you help me to shape our services better? I know that there are some things that we haven't got right in the past, we may not be getting right now, so how do we shape that and adjust that better, particularly for our young people? So I'm really keen to hear that, and I love the voice of young people to do that. But I'm really keen on it as well. The medium long term, yeah, let's definitely work to that, but also what can we do now? So what can we do now? So Kickstart is a limited time opportunity. We've got that through to the end of the year. Just come from Southern City College this morning. We've got a sort of like a recruitment event there. Some great opportunities for young people being recruited on the day in the time. And I know that we're going to be working more to do more of those going forward. So for me, it's threefold. Help shape the services that job centres deliver, improve them better, tell me what we could do better. I'm here to listen and hear what isn't good, what could be better. What can we do right now while we've got the opportunity, and just point me in the direction of the task force or the group of colleagues that are going to come together to make those 10 recommendations work. So I'm committed to supporting that.
Thank you so much. We are 100% taking you up on that. Right, Liam.
I think this is a really welcome and important offer that the city sees with both hands, because what I just want to underline is the point about money. So what we must not do is what we have done for the last 16 years, which is write a 3-year plan with a 3-year budget that takes 9 months to hire people, 15 months of delivery, and then it's all wound down again. I think last year I was on my 5th round of 3-year plans, and I've still got the highest youth unemployment in the country in my constituency. So that approach, put it aside, because we have tested it to destruction and it doesn't work. So as part and parcel of this, what the partners need to do, and this is why it's such a welcome offer, the partners need to come to the table in a month and a half's time to say, these are my assets and these are my budgets. And then the city actually needs to produce one balance sheet and one revenue line that maps who's got what money and what can be shared and spent more effectively. Now, what we will find when we look at that is that the people with the biggest amount of assets and the most amount of money are the academy chains. And so making sure that the academy chains and our educators are kind of hardwired into this is going to be really difficult, and really important. The nationalisation of the education system that we've had, coupled with the fragmentation that we've got, is a catastrophe. But unless we join up the budgets at kind of ground level and think about how to spend them differently over 10 years, not 3 years, but over 10 years, let's take, you know, Councillor Ward's vision of the kind of the golden decade and say, right, this is the total place, the total funding pot, the total fiscal strategy for young people over the course of the golden decade. And let's have the partners actually sign it. And certainly, I know I speak for all of my colleagues in Parliament on all sides of the aisle, we will be very happy to go and have that discussion with however many Secretaries of State you want. Now, crucially, it needs to be in before the Comprehensive Spending Review in November, which basically means it needs to be in September. So as a kind of as a financial strategy to go with it, you know, that is going to be the key to making real progress with this, I think.
Right, we're totally taking you and the MPs up on that as well.
Very welcome.
Right, I'm going to draw this to a close because we are running out of time and we'll probably get kicked out of the building or something. So loads of you have asked what next, which I'm going to try and set out. So we've got the recommendations. We are setting up a new Birmingham Employment Task Force to take them forward, which Ilgan is leading on creating. I know we've got great work at the LEP, we've got great work at the CA, we've got great work across the piece, but we need something for that Birmingham footprint because our problems are so deep and so acute. And also we're massive. we need something that works specifically for the problems in our city, which we've been exploring, and we've got recommendations to take forward. So we'll be looking partners to you to come join that, to be part of that. We haven't tapped you up already, we will be doing so. Because we need your expertise, we need you around the table. As Liam said, we need to be having those conversations about money and where we work better together to take all this stuff forward. Young people need to be threaded into this. We need you holding us to account on this, and it's your futures really that we're here to do this for. If you think something that isn't working, we need to be hearing back from you. So we're going to be building in those mechanisms to what we do going forward. We're going to keep engaging people like the Young Combined Authority, people like the Youth City Board, to make sure we've got that temperature check on all of it going forward. And of course, Councillor Francis has had to abandon me. Try not to take it too personally. But we're going to be actually going to a Q&A with young people shortly after this, actually to start road testing some of this stuff with them and look at how we take it forward. So I'll wrap this up. We've got amazing opportunities on the horizon as a city. We really, really have. But I know it doesn't look that way sometimes from the vantage point as young people. So this is what we're going to try and do to fix it. This is what we're going to try and do to get you where you are now to those opportunities. And we've got so much to play for here. It's going to be a really exciting future, I think, as we come out of COVID. Thank you so much for all coming today. Really lovely to see you in person. And look forward to working with you all going forward. Thank you.